Oh yeah, you really hate Sonic the Hedgehog, don't you, Yarts? That's why you can't keep your hands off him every time he brings a new game out, and know the complete history of the franchise and the names of all the characters, stammering, but it's not because I like you or anything. Why don't you finally stop lying to yourself, grab 2 fistfuls of blue quills, and do something that would get you thrown out of a badger watching station? Look, I can't help it if Sonic the Hedgehog makes for such an effective dance partner in the course of my usual routine of taking the piss out of shit, if you'll forgive the technical lingo. Maybe I like being around him because he reminds me of my toddler, in that he always seems to find more and more new interesting things to do with shit. Anyway, I didn't go into Sonic Superstars firmly intending to review it. I should have been playing Spider-Man 2 this week, but I haven't quite finished the apology card and pasta picture I'm hoping will make Sony start sending us review codes again. But I still had other things to play, and it was only a fit of morbid curiosity that made me give Superstars a go, and I swiftly found I had a lot of discussion material to go over. A lot of it relating to shit, again like with my toddler. And it's not because Sonic Team never learn. They've learned enough to remove all spoken dialogue from Sonic Superstars, which was a definite step in the right direction for me, because every time Sonic opens his freakish side of the face mouth, I get mystic visions of Saved by the Bell characters sucking their own dicks so hard that spunk squirts out their tear ducts. The success of Sonic Mania has also caused Sonic Team to learn something, and that was to make a game that's basically Sonic Mania again, but with 3D graphics and 4-player co-op. Not that the second part means a whole lot to me, because the toddler isn't allowed to hold controllers until they've figured out what is and is not an appropriate place for shit. But it's a pretty serviceable single-player 2D Sonic game. That's kind of my problem. Sonic Mania and Sonic Superstars demonstrate the crucial difference between making a loving homage and just hacking out another one. Sonic Mania was infused with wink-wink references to the older games, but at the same time elevated the material, adding new touches, details, a complexity that wasn't possible at the time. Sonic Superstars, meanwhile, is another 2D Sonic game. 7 or 8 stages with the same themes as always. Remember when Sonic 2 had Casino Night Zone, and Sonic 3 had something similar called the Carnival Night Zone? Well, Sonic Pooper Stars has the Casino Carnival Zone, and that should clue you in as to what level of innovative spirit we're operating on here. Still, the gameplay has some new ideas. When you get Chaos Emeralds with the Sonic 3 style mid-stage minigames, each one grants a new superpower, ranging from a mid-air boost, the ability to turn into water, to reveal hidden objects, and that's officially all the ones I'm aware of, because I spent the rest of my time with the game trying to beat the bonus level that unlocks the 5th emerald, and repeatedly failing the bastard. It involves chasing the emerald through a sort of starfield in 3D space, boosting off of objects as you get close to them, but because you're in mid-air, and there's no frame of reference for the relative positioning of objects and what direction they're moving in, the result is about as fun and intuitive as trying to isolate a single Cheerio from a bowl of the fuckers, while your spoon is tied to the ceiling fan with a bungee cord. And of the various stage-interrupting bonus rounds whose portals I keep accidentally bouncing into, it's still the more tolerable one. The one that you get at the checkpoints is a rehash of the bonus round from all the way back in Sonic 1 with the rotating background, and that music like you're being slowly dragged across broken glass by a merry-go-round. You know, the thing that was immediately dropped in the very first sequel because it killed the flow as assuredly as a hideous factory line accident. Wait, says Sonic Pooper Scooper. I think the flow's still twitching a bit. Better make sure you do the minigame 2 more times to finish it off for good. What have you got against flow, Sonic Superbad? It's the excuse my wife always uses to get out of having sex with me. So I very firmly stopped voluntarily going into that particular bonus round, and not wanting to play a bonus round is like not wanting any cake. Either you're ill or something's gone very wrong with that cake. Anyway, the only reward for this minigame is big coins of initially unclear purpose, and that was when I started smelling a big blue pointy rat. Why does this game keep giving me big coins? I wondered. They're scattered about the maps, you get them as end level rewards, as well as if you go to the Chaos Emerald minigame twice in one stage, because God forbid we make it any easier to collect the glittery bastards. And I was suspicious because there's only a small semantic jump from big coin to premium currency. Detective Yahtzee was on the case. I quit out back to the main menu, whereupon a text box popped up saying, would you like to spend your big coins in the cosmetics shop? Oh, Detective Yahtzee does it again. Not cosmetics for Sonic and pals to use in the campaign. God no. People kick up enough of a stink if his arms are blue instead of flesh tone. No, cosmetics for your robot avatar with which you play the online battle royale mode. And oh boy, at that point my curiosity was so morbid it was selling miniature coffins outside an American elementary school. Great big flesh tone willies to the campaign. That's just another pack of 2D Sonic levels with some irritating bonus levels and a fucking irritating final boss fight. I want to see this train wreck unfold. If it had actually been Sonic Battle Royale, 100 Sonics cascading through a level together in a spectacular concentration of failure, rivaled only by a professional wrestler's music career, I'd have been down. Sadly, it's only 10 players to a match, and it's closer in spirit to something like Fall Guys, a collection of quick free-for-all minigames, and then someone pretends to be the winner. When I say collection, I mean about 4. A standard race, a collapsing platforms endurance-a-thon, a thing where you run around the arena collecting stars, which I came first in more than once by remaining perfectly still and waiting for stars to randomly appear right next to my face. I ultimately came second in that tournament and won 8 big coins, with which I was able to buy 8/10 of one of the 2 paint colours available in the store at the time, which I could apply to precisely 1 body part. What are you selling this paint in? Yogurt pots? Oh, and when I say each match is 10 players, that's only theoretically. In almost every match I got into, it was me, one other player with an elaborate outfit who'd clearly played this way too much, and 8 bots. And that was the best it could do after making me wait 5 minutes for matchmaking. Apparently the game's sense of flow was still showing vague signs of brain activity. Maybe I wasn't playing at peak time. Maybe I should have waited till after the remedial school's chucked out. Nevertheless, I'm prepared to call Time of Death and declare Sonic Underpants a decisive shitstravaganza, which was also what I called the last time I gave my toddler banana oatmeal. Finally, we get to Spider-Man 2, or to give the more accurate title, Two Spider-Mans, because this time we get to switch between playing as Peter Parker and Miles Morales and can appreciate the stark contrast between the two. Peter is an awkward nerd with superpowers who struggles with balancing his personal life and his desire to fight crime while dressed like an extreme sports techno-gimp, whereas Miles is an awkward nerd with superpowers who struggles with balancing his personal life and his desire to fight crime while dressed like an extreme sports techno-gimp and is black. I jest, of course. There's also the fact that Peter continues to resemble a buff dude from the neck down and a 12-year-old with an inexpensive barber from the neck up, and while he takes pains to hide his secret identity from those close to him, Miles basically blabs it to anyone he goes on a second Tinder date with. Not that it matters that much, since all the established villains seem to have gone straight at the outset of Two Spider-Mans, but trouble arises when Kraven the Hunter shows up with an army of fanatics and basically occupies the city to mount a campaign of springing supervillains and challenging them to fights to the death. Serious question, does New York City even have a police force? I remember them showing up once or twice at the ends of missions to arrest people, so I assume they're all waiting around the corner going, give it 10 minutes, Spider-Man hasn't had a personal epiphany yet. I just wonder why no one in authority is opposing Kraven at all. Hell, the flippin' TSA should have raised the alarm as he was coming through customs. Anything to declare besides the international terrorist militia, fleet of invisible attack planes, and pack of robot wolves? Silly question to ask in superhero storytelling, I know. Might as well ask why there's no OSHA compliance, preventing the inevitable burning building or exploding roller coaster at precisely the moment where it would be very humiliating for Peter or Miles to have to declare a sudden diarrhea emergency and run off. Now, Spider-Man 1 being a perfectly decent if somewhat cluttered game, Spider-Man Part 2 was in the awkward position of having very little to improve upon and an awful lot of things it could fudge up. I really thought I was going to hate the new wingsuit. In theory, anything that takes away from the web swinging in Spider-Man game traversal is like focusing on the complimentary sausage rolls at an artisanal bacon festival, but thankfully it never replaces web swinging, merely gives you an option when you run out of buildings besides taking a great big mouthful of pavement panini. And there's still enough skill involved to make it interesting, so that's fine. In fact, it's mostly fine. Let's skip to the end for a moment. Let me summarise my broad feelings about Spider-Man with an anecdote. I had Saturday afternoon off and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to play. You know how a sitcom wife can look at a pile of clothes the exact shape and proportions of a dead humpback whale and announce they haven't got a thing to wear? That's me with my video game collection. But I eventually concluded that I wanted to play more Spider-Man 2. I wanted to spend a few hours swinging about the city, punching crime in the teeth. Spider-Man 2 is therefore officially a game I wanted to play when I had no obligation to do so. Let that be the thing you take away after I'm finished spending the next 3 paragraphs picking at it like it's a stubborn price sticker on a new piece of expensive electronics. As I said, after Spider-Man 1, there were many ways they could have fucked it up. One failure, for example, would have been to not remove the bits where you have to play as Mary Jane in mandatory stealth sections, and that opportunity whizzed straight past Spider-Man 2 like a short-sighted territorial magpie. Oh, they give Mary Jane an instant takedown stun gun this time, but that just made me wonder why the hell the Spider-Mans have to punch a dude 15 times to get the same result. It's nothing personal, Mary Jane, it's just, have you noticed the title of the game you're in? If I play a game called Sergeant Flashy Bollocks, it's because I want to spend time only in the company of the most luminescent of testicles. Stop insisting on getting presents when it isn't your birthday party. In fact, all my red marks and see me notes relate to the story campaign. Mary Jane is far from the worst of it when it comes to taking away from the superhero action. Have you ever wanted to play Peter Parker in normal human mode, bumming around the house picking up litter for 10 minutes, or bumming around a theme park and getting on a teacups ride where he can, and hold on to your adult diapers because this might well cause a containment breach, press a button to put his hands up for a second? Wow, why did I ever think dive bombing off the Empire State Building was the pinnacle of excitement? This is becoming typical of Sony exclusives. If it's not God of War making us watch Kratos and pals sullenly eating breakfast together, occasionally pressing X to pass the butter, it's epic superhero tidying your bedroom action. Even in the superhero battles, Spider-Man's tights show the trademark laddering of having been stretched out unnecessarily long. There are multiple boss fights where you get their entire health bar down, there's a brief cutscene of the boss going, oh boy, now I'm really mad, all their health comes back and you just fight them again in exactly the same way, maybe with one new attack if you're lucky. I wonder if this is because, since virtually every Spider-Man villain has a personal connection to Spider-Man, boss fights also have to be these prolonged one-on-one therapy sessions where the characters scream out apologies and in treatments to remember their true selves in between mule kicks to the teeth. Are you complaining about the story of a superhero comic game being reading like a superhero comic again, yards. Oh, piss off. You know what? I'm going to be a superhero fan for a second. Look at me. I like people in capes hitting each other and choke out clouds of offended Cheeto dust whenever a black person gets cast as an established white character in a film. I'm really invested in iconic supervillains now, and I'm annoyed by the way Spider-Man 2 does them dirty. Spoiler warning till end of video before you will redirect your Cheeto clouds in my direction. Remember Vulture, Electro, and Shocker? Remember the unique character designs and boss fights from the first game that a lot of people probably worked very hard on? Well, they all died off screen. Slow down, Insomniac Games, you're wasting iconic villains faster than the 90s Batman films. Sandman, the Lizard, and Mysterio all show up for the first time in this canon, but are all reformed. So they must have had their origin stories, got beaten up by Spider-Man, and had major character growth off screen. And I'm like, Spider-Man alive, Spider-Man 2. You made me clean up Peter Parker's discarded Chinese takeout, but you couldn't make time for any of that. Oh, and this series is really edging the Green Goblin, isn't it? This is 2 games they've been setting him up, but at this point I don't see how he could possibly represent a raising of the stakes. They can't even play up the personal connection to Spider-Man because whoops, that's every villain. I mean, he doesn't have robot tentacles or is a literal alien invasion. He's just a buff dude who surfs like he was bitten by a radioactive Australian.
You know what? I think nostalgia gets a bad rap. I mean, yeah, things can go south if you're too lost in the sauce and can't take off your rose-tinted glasses, but for me, it is just as exciting to dig through the forgotten nooks and crannies of gaming's past as it is to look forward to the next big thing on the horizon. Don't you think, Yachts?
Oh yeah, because Banjo-Kazooie was officially the moment all human culture peaked, wasn't it? Why don't you go back to the past and see if it holds up as much as you're misremembering?
Huh, what's this thing do? Low-rise jeans, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. Feels like 2002 again, which means the perfect time to grab my GameCube by its very useful handle and meander through the world of survival horror. There is no shortage of off-the-beaten-path Resident Evil games that I could highlight for a neat little retrospective. Resident Evil Gaiden was a bizarre attempt to demake and reimagine the series on the Game Boy Color. Resident Evil Survivor was a light gun game that has light gun compatibility removed at the 25th hour in the US, and then there's Dino Crisis, which isn't technically a Resident Evil game, but it's great, and Capcom won't mention it, so I might as well. But the game we're going to focus on today is 2002's Resident Evil 0, a gorgeous, underplayed prequel that oscillates between inspired and insipid, and ushered in a generational shift for the series when it passed the baton over to Resi 4. As the 90s came to a close, Capcom's Resident Evil franchise was sitting on top of the gaming world. They'd found themselves with hit after hit on their hands with the original trilogy on PS1, and then Code Veronica on the Dreamcast showed that there was enough zombie-killing love to go around to all the platform holders, including Nintendo. Resident Evil 0 began life on the Nintendo 64. The prequel was set to utilize the strengths of Nintendo's cartridge-based games, which meant no loading times for their core idea of swapping instantly between 2 characters. Sadly, a troubled production caused the game to get shelved and eventually rebooted on the GameCube. Honestly, the story of pretty much any Resident Evil game ever probably includes the words troubled production at some point. But before 0 comes 1. Or something like that, because the franchise's first big splash on the GameCube was Shinji Mikami's fantastic remake of the original Resident Evil in 2002. Its gorgeous visuals, dense atmosphere, and terrifying additions like the Crimson Heads made it truly feel like the definitive version of the original survival horror vision. But while Mikami would move to the troubled production Take a Drink of Resident Evil 4, Capcom wanted to keep milking that cash cow before it zombified, and thus Resident Evil 0 returned, although almost entirely remade from the ground up. Set the day before the events of the original Resident Evil in the Arcalay Mountains surrounding the Spencer Mansion, 0 centers on the familiar Rebecca Chambers, the medic from RE1, and newcomer Billy Cohen, a convicted war criminal who looks like Timothy Olyphant in Scream 2 and does not own a shirt with sleeves. Fun fact. While the previous Resi games had you locked into your initial choice of Chris or Jill, Leon or Claire, Zero embraces the Panera Bread mantra of you pick two. At almost any point in the game, you can tap a button to instantly inhabit the body of the other character. It's called the zapping system for some reason, even though the on-screen effect looks less like a zap and more like a smear. But I guess smearing system probably didn't focus test all that well. These two survivors have their own unique inventories and puzzles. Rebecca's medical training allows her to mix herbs and certain ingredients for puzzles, and Billy is a big, strong boy that can push heavy objects like a big, strong boy does. These asymmetrical abilities lead to a handful of neat situations where the pair are split up, forcing you to smear back and forth between the two in order to solve a shared puzzle. Finding items with Billy and sending them on a dumbwaiter to Rebecca makes for some great outside-the-box moments of revelation, and I wish these were used far more often throughout the campaign. While the two are together, basic AI commands can be given in the menu, like waste all of our ammo or get bitten without defending yourself. That said, this extra step of constantly opening up the menu to adapt to a given scenario made the system feel a bit cumbersome, leading to a lot of situations where I just told the other character to stay put in a safe room while Papa went out for a pack of green herbs. But if you're not worried about burning through ammo, exploring the world and clearing out rooms back to back with your AI-controlled companion has a great energy to it, and feels kind of like the progenitor of the co-op that would eventually be added into 5 and 6. The other major departure in Resi Zero comes from the series' iconic item boxes, or in this case, the lack thereof. Gone are the connected pocket dimensions where you can store all the little trinkets you pick up along your travels. Instead, Rebecca and Billy can trade items between their two separate inventories, and then whatever you can't carry at a given moment can be tossed on the ground and picked up later on. This led to me going full goblin mode in the main lobby of the mansion until the game eventually sent me a cease and desist letter from dropping any more items in that room. So that's nice. The ingredients of a really neat idea that upends the traditional formula are here, but it felt like they needed a bit more time in the oven. As it stands, you find yourself doing an unhealthy amount of backtracking, especially if you don't drag along the hookshot to each new area. It's this context-sensitive item that is useless 99% of the time until that 1% of situations where it is absolutely necessary to proceed. And it's here that Zero's lack of an item box becomes a real problem. But honestly, all of these complaints just melt away the second I lay eyes on the game itself, because man, oh man, the pre-rendered backgrounds in this and Remake are every bit as brilliant as they were 20 years ago. It's a genuine shame that AAA games have evolved past these, because there's a theater backdrop-like artistry in them that's missing in fully explorable places. Every single room is meticulously laid out, lending to a genuine sense of place throughout the entire game, especially the fantastic train section of the opening act.
Roger, I'll put the brake on now.
Seriously, this is a top 5 train in games next to the Last Express, the spooky train that gets suplexed in Final Fantasy VI. You remember that? Well, the one level in Uncharted 2, that was a neat one. And there's that whole Zelda DS game that no one seems to talk about anymore. So there you go. And while things become more familiar in the back half of Zero, with a mansion that feels similar to the original game, as well as the series' standard sewers and industrial complexes, they're all lovingly pre-rendered, and I just liked existing in them. As for Zero's story, okay, I'm gonna level with you. I replayed this game on stream in its entirety like 45 days ago, and I've forgotten almost everything about its plot other than the major beats. There's this Sephiroth-looking fellow who can control bugs, all the while Albert Wesker and William Birkin are up to no good behind the scenes.
We'll see which one of us is gonna die.
That said, by trying to answer questions nobody really had about the series, Zero introduces a major continuity error as it leads into the original game. The fact that Rebecca is a frightened damsel in RE1 just hours after being a bona fide zombie monkey killing machine in this game is a strange pill to swallow. But given that this is a series where men punch boulders and reattach their severed hands by splashing a bit of peroxide on the wound instead of going to therapy, I guess I can give it a pass. So with all of this, why is it that Resident Evil Zero seems to be one of the more forgotten and underplayed entries in the series? Well, first off, its timing was unfortunate. Releasing on the GameCube 6 months after Eternal Darkness did not help, as that one brought so many new and interesting ideas to the table in comparison. It's also in the shadow of Silent Hill 2 and its residual impact of, oh, so these are the kinds of stories horror games can tell. And Zero did come out later in the same calendar year as Resident Evil 1 Remake, and as beloved as that game was, some franchise fatigue may have started to set in. In a way, Zero felt like the straw that broke the camel's back, putting the franchise on a holding pattern until RE4 came along and completely reinvented the series, as well as AAA gaming as a whole. In that respect, RE0 remains a line of demarcation between the first and second phases of Capcom's M-rated baby. As for what happens next, well, Resi Zero exists in this unique spot in the current state of the franchise. Given the success Capcom has had in remaking 2, 3, and 4, it would make sense that they'd continue that trend. But whether they look back at the original in Zero, to the side at Code Veronica, or forwards to 5 and 6 remains to be seen. Part of me would love to see them take another stab at the dual character setup once again with modern design sensibilities that could really make for something special and unique. Even with all of its blemishes, and there are about as many as you'd find on this guy, Resident Evil Zero remains a charming relic of a very different time in history. I had a blast revisiting the game on modern hardware. It's available on PC and all consoles, and is constantly on sale for a few bucks, which is always appreciated. For fans of survival horror, gorgeous pre-rendered backgrounds, great ideas that feel a tad underbaked, top 5 sickest trains ever, and shirts with a distinct lack of sleeves, Resident Evil Zero is absolutely worth a modern revisit.
Rebecca!
Well, now that I've got a handle on this nice little remote, I might as well make the most of it. I wonder what other nostalgic gems I can revisit if I just tap this button here and...
Who puts a mousetrap in a melon? But you know what? It does remind me of a story. The video game move was a maneuver many NASCAR drivers had heard about, few believed, and even fewer dared to attempt. The driver accelerates as fast as they can on a straightaway. They ease their car into the wall while continuing to accelerate through the turn and then shoot out on the other side. This wall ride of sorts was a way of harnessing the power of physics, so to speak. The intense centripetal force the cars go through on the turns usually forces drivers to slow down to safer speeds. Other tracks like the Daytona International Speedway are pitched at a 30-degree angle so cars can take the turns faster. This technique was wishful thinking centered around overcoming the tracks that didn't angle as much. Carl Edwards might have been the first to try the wall ride technique on the Kansas track in 2008. He claimed the trick was inspired by a video game but said hitting the barrier in real life slowed him down more than he had anticipated.
Johnson comes back to the bottom as
Kyle Larson had a more successful attempt in 2021 on the Darlington Raceway. He slowed perfectly into the wall and he was gaining speed but was forced to slow down because he was blocked by the driver in front of him, showing that it was definitely possible but ultimately impractical due to leaving you so vulnerable on the wall. Worth mentioning, it was also deadly. If the barrier wasn't properly secured, a car could accidentally push open an access gate while riding the wall and crash head-on into the concrete at over 100 miles per hour. Even with all that, Ross Chastain knew he had no better option as he rounded the last lap of the Xfinity 500 on the Martinsville Speedway in Ridgeway, Virginia in October 2022. The Xfinity 500 is 500 laps on a just over half-mile track for a total of 263 miles. One of the shorter tracks of the season compared to the monster that is the Coca-Cola 600 or the prestigious Indianapolis 500-mile race. But the Xfinity 500 was the 9th race of the Cup Series playoffs and Ross Chastain's last hope to make it into the finals for a shot at the championship title. After over 3 hours of gassing and passing, Ross Chastain found himself trailing behind the leaders of the pack. He didn't need to cross the finish line in first place to make it to the finals. He only needed to come in 5th and he would acquire enough points to qualify for the championship race. That's the good news. The bad news is Chastain was in 10th place heading into the final lap. He only had a half-mile left to make something happen. Considering the average racing speed was 113 miles per hour, that was only about 20 seconds to pull a miracle. As Ross Chastain went into the last curve of the lap, he didn't look to God. He didn't look to the devil. He looked back to his childhood and recalled a maneuver his younger brother used to do in NASCAR 2005 for the GameCube on this very track at this very moment. He angled himself to make contact with the wall right before the turn, put the car into 5th gear, and let go of the wheel to do the video game move.
Championship!
Let's go get us a championship.
And the
Hell of a job, bud.
point! Right at the line! The one of Chastain past Hamlin!
Holy cow. I guess it does work. Holy that was straight video game.
I think the first time I ever saw a race car do that was on a video game, the GameCube 2005, the GameCube like console. I don't know if anybody else in the world had those, but we did, and my brother Chad beat me doing it.
Gotta get him? Yeah, gotta get him. Need two.
In split seconds, he shot into 9th, 8th, 7th, 6th, and the much-needed 5th place before being blocked by the car in front of him. But he did it. He drove at unprecedented speeds of 130 miles per hour, broke the record for fastest lap at Martinsville, and qualified for the championship race by the skin of his teeth. The world went mad as they finally saw the rumored video game move used to its full effect in a real-life event. But now it was given a new name to honor the driver that saw it through to the end, the Hail Melon. Hail as in Hail Mary, a last-ditch play commonly used in football. Melon as in Ross Chastain grew up as a melon farmer and liked smashing watermelons on the track. Sweet but short-lived. Despite his death-defying wall-ride spectacle, he finished in 2nd place at the championship, and a few months later, in January of 2023, the move was banned from NASCAR, as it was no longer considered impractical and the higher-ups were afraid drivers were going to smash into the walls to try and shave a few seconds off of their laps. At least we'll always have Martinsville, and we'll always have the Hail Melon.
Ross Chastain will smash a watermelon after the win.
Is there anyone that particularly does not want me to smash this pig?
Let's try something a little different, a little girthier today, shall we? Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Not Total Biscuit. Today we'll be talking about AI and the video game industry. Although you might have noticed I take influence from the cynical Brit who dedicated his YouTube career to helping others make informed purchases, I do not speak with the same authority of someone who earned his law degree. And in spite of the topic in question coming directly from the White House, this is not, I repeat, not political. My focus is in business and video games. You are not allowed to take anything I say as sound advice of any kind. If you try to sue me, I'll sue you back. For legal reasons, that last bit was a joke. October 30, 2023. President Joe Biden signed Executive Order 14110, Safe, Secure, and Trustworthy Development and Use of Artificial Intelligence. It does just that. Sets out an outline to oversee the continued growth and use of AI while making sure the jobs and privacy of Americans are as safe as can be. Why would you need such a thing? It's a better safe than sorry kind of thing. I'll be covering what AI is, the promises, the perils, the executive order, and why any gamer should care, or at least why I do. AI stands for Artificial Intelligence. That name has different meanings. Some take it to mean technology has advanced to the point where we've made a sentient, self-teaching, self-correcting being that will rule over us all, but that's mostly wishful thinking and fear-mongering that's attracted fanaticism. In the old religions, God makes man. In the new religion, man makes God. AI nowadays operates closer to autocorrect on ducking steroids because it is pulling information from the entirety of the internet at impossible speeds, but it still needs humans to give it context. It is not only useful, but superior when dealing with tedious bulk tasks like the ones you'd expect in financial reports, or solving those horrible math problems where Jimmy has 47 watermelons, he gives you half and eats half of his. It's not as good at telling you why Jimmy threw up after eating 11.75 watermelons. AI is good for creating and following an order of operations, but it's difficult to define right or wrong as binary properties. You need nuance to operate in the gray. The court system rules on that nuance. If you thought going through court was a slow process, it's even slower when dealing with new cases that have no precedent, as is the case for artificial intelligence. The sheer amount of AI-related lawsuits that are popping up are growing and will continue to grow, jamming up the courts even more. That is why the Biden administration stepped in with an executive order, not to stop the use of AI, but to set together a plan to help regulate its implementations across many fields. This does two key things. Firstly, it helps alleviate a lot of the stresses at court. Secondly, you don't have to wait years on legislation from Congress. According to Joe Biden and co., the US has a sizable head start in AI businesses relative to the rest of the world. So the process is being streamlined to prevent their lead from diminishing while also making sure that they don't bring ruin to the economy. As referenced in the order, quote, artificial intelligence holds extraordinary potential for both promise and peril, unquote. What promise? Ideally, AI would be a tool to help us do away with the mundane tasks and the inefficiencies in everyday life, which in turn will help us make everything more cost-effective, and we can reinvest the saved resources into further advancements. For the video game industry specifically, development expenses would shrink if you saved money on the art, the writing, the voice acting, and some of the more tedious processes like arranging maps. Production time would be slashed, which would allow games to make better use of the improving technology, instead of trying to cram their development cycle between next-gen console releases and graphics cards. This would take away some of the advantages AAA has over the rest of the competition in the development scene, all the way down to independent studios, thus increasing quality control naturally. This is what we are after, but we're not at that level just yet. Even if we are all in agreement of an AI-assisted utopia, it still needs too much human input for context and oversight, as Stephen Schwartz learned earlier this year, when he, a lawyer, a bona fide, passed-the-bar exam lawyer, used ChatGPT for a court hearing, and the AI program cited fake cases, which he then used and was reprimanded for not double-checking. Poor Schwartz. There lies the problem. Say a studio develops a game with AI which then pulls licensed Nintendo assets or uses Scarlett Johansson's modified voice for the voice acting. Nintendo already has a reputation for not liking human fan-made modifications, and Scarlett Johansson just won her legal action against an AI app that used her image in an advertisement without permission. So while AI would definitely boost productivity, it also could increase the amount of lawsuits you catch. Anything more than 0 lawsuits is less than ideal, and because AI is a superpowered autocomplete function that pulls and mashes up everything from the internet, there is no way for a developer to know if it is safe to use. You can't risk even 1% of your work being taken from someone else, so it's safer to assume it is all stolen. That's where the sentiment that AI is theft comes from. It's like a baby taking a lollipop from the grocery store while mom is pushing the buggy. The baby don't know any better and cannot understand the concept that it's okay to eat lollipops that have been paid for, but it's not okay to eat the ones that haven't been paid for. To a baby, a lollipop is a lollipop, and to legal systems, theft is theft. But because we are humans, we don't toss the baby into the hoosgow to put an early end to its kleptomaniacal ways, no. We can do the human thing where mom apologizes and pays for the lollipop. Or the grocer's in a charitable mood and does that thing where he goes, haha, no worries, ma'am, it's just a baby and that's just a lollipop. In time, perhaps, artificial intelligence can get there. There is promise. Now what are the perils? There's a lot of them dealing with innovation, privacy, equity, and so on, but for our immediate purposes, I'll focus on Section 6, supporting workers. In plain speak, but remember, I'm not a lawyer. Section 6 is about creating a plan to assess the impact AI would have on people's jobs, mitigating as much of the damage as possible to the job quality and labor standards, and also making sure people who lose their jobs to AI can be assisted with federal aid. Combine this and the rest of the executive order, and it puts a temporary buffer to the worst-case scenario of the entire boots-on-the-ground video game industry workforce being thrown out. This year alone, we've seen 6,400 jobs being knocked out during another year with all-time record-breaking revenue. That number is climbing, and they're just the ones that we know about to begin with. The average CEO chasing infinite growth only has 3 tricks up their sleeves: raise prices, demand more output, and cut costs. Everyone can clearly see prices have gone up, so I won't harp on those. We know the games industry cannot increase its output. The responsible adults like Larian Studios have said they're scaling back their next project in spite of the meteoric success of Baldur's Gate 3. And the irresponsible adults like Epic Games and Bungie just laid off a combined 970 people after admitting they could not continue to grow even with more manpower. If you're following, that means prices are up and output has hit its limit. So the next obvious move is to replace the manpower with AI power. It's worth noting Bungie was already looking for a generative AI lead tools engineer, a senior data scientist for machine learning and AI at the end of September, and hired a director of machine learning in 2022. I've never met a computer that could outdrink me, so I'm not worried about my job in regards to quality. I think if I can't outright ChatGPT, then I have no business writing to begin with. But we always lose the fight between man and machine learning because businesses don't judge on quality alone. They mostly judge on money, and quality is only part of the formula for money. Another part of the formula is affordability. Our inherent operating costs for being human beings makes us inefficient. Machines don't need a salary, they don't burn out, they don't need sleep, they don't retire, they don't die. You and I know there's a difference in quality between a game that makes $1 million and a game that makes $1. You and I know that a $1 million game is way more enjoyable than $1 million $1 games. There is no difference to a CEO whose only focus is numbers. $1 million spends the same way no matter how you get it. But these people are not the type to make $1 million game. If they could, they would be doing it already. So don't think for 1 second there would be any hesitation about more layoffs and flooding the shelves with dollar game trash. You only have to look at the mobile gaming market to see it. Mobile games sell more than PC and console games combined, and they already have a problem with cheap cash grabs. But we don't have to go looking that far because Ubisoft is already developing an AI ghostwriter to write dialogue for its games and is using AI art in its promotional material. I know what you're thinking. Why would anyone care if the job in question that's being replaced is that of a social media artist or an SEO writer? Does anyone really aspire to be the guy who places the trees or programs the physics of your horse's drop-ins in Red Dead Redemption? No, those tend to be entry-level positions. They're a means to get your foot in the door of a company so you can get some hands-on training, and then you move up to placing cacti and animating bear droppings until you can be a lead or a senior programmer designer. In my personal opinion, I think those jobs should be given to AI anyways, and newer, better entry-level jobs should be created, which is an idea presented in the executive order. But I understand that leaving this up to executives means they won't be looked into at all. There is also the case to be made for preserving that kind of knowledge even if it is seen as outdated. Regardless, closing the doorway to the industry means newer talent cannot get in, and there goes the entire games industry workforce once again, but in this scenario it takes longer to dry up. In summary, the potential good that can come from AI is unfathomable, but we haven't taken a proper first step just yet. The potential risks of AI are not only fathomable, they're downright predictable because greedy businessmen have only 3 moves in their infinite growth playbook: raise prices, increase output, and cut costs. We're past increasing prices. While AI can help with increasing output, its method of gathering data could accidentally attract lawsuits for overstepping someone's privacy or trademarks, and progress could stall out in the American court system, thus losing the lead that it has on the world. Cutting costs would be the inevitable next step, and some AAA companies have already started switching. I believe humans can compete in a contest of quality, but AI's low operating costs will always come out ahead in affordability. A switch to AI will require significant oversight, planning, and safety measures. Otherwise, the video game industry will be impacted by massive layoffs or a talent drought when entry-level positions are done away with. The Biden administration's executive order is trying to address the current gray area with AI while also mitigating risks to prevent rash business practices from damaging the workforce so that we can continue to try and harness AI's maximum potential. I believe this is a great first step to taking a first step in the right direction. I am not a lawyer. No further questions, Your Honor.